Welcome everyone. So we will be discussing Indian contribution to science. This is a book which is compiled by Vigyan Bharati, and this is one of the chapters which is there for the VVM examination. For the historic evolution of medicinal tradition in ancient India. Specialization into 8 branches. The history of medicine in India spans a period of several thousand years, definitely dating back to a few centuries before the Common Era. There is evidence that the earliest textbooks of Ayurveda, like Charaka Samhita, General Medicine, Susrata Samhita, Surgery, and Kashyapa Samhita, Pediatrics, were edited and revised several times over 1,000 years. They attained their current form in the first few centuries of the Common Era. It is an amazing fact that so early Sanskrit texts were composed dealing exclusively with specialties like pediatric surgery, ophthalmology, ENT, and so on. In these texts, Ayurveda is already seen in a developed form, specialized into 8 branches: general medicines, surgery, ophthalmology, ENT, dentistry, pediatrics, psychiatry, toxicology, regenerative medicines, and reproductive medicines. Around the 6th and or 7th century CE, the renowned physicians Vagada compiled the specialized knowledge of 8 branches of Ayurveda into one compendium. The larger version is known as Ashtanga Samgraha, or the shorter version is called as Ashtanga Hridaya. The tradition of surgery. The tradition of surgery in Ayurveda has a long history. Research at the University of Missouri, Columbia discovered that physicians in ancient India had developed technology to drill teeth and remove decay 8,000 to 9,000 years ago. Study of the fossil from Mergar, now in Pakistan, revealed tiny holes drilled into the teeth on the biting surface of the male molars. Evidence has also been unearthed from Harappa and Lothal, revealing an ancient surgical practice on a bronze 8 skulls dating back to nearly 4,300 years ago. Trepanation, a common means of surgery practiced in prehistoric societies starting with the Stone Age, involved drilling or cutting through the skull vault, often to treat head injury or to remove bone splinters or blood clots caused by a blow to the head. So here, if you find out here, we have the Mesolithic rock painting from Bhimbek Madhya Pradesh seems to depict surgery being performed on a subject's head or eye. This is the folio from a manuscript of Susrata Samhita, an Ayurvedic textbook of various surgical procedures and surgical instruments. The saga of Indian surgery continued to flourish and reach its acme in the time of Shusruta, who is believed to have lived in the 2nd century BC. Shusruta is now revered as the father of surgery and advocated a thorough study of anatomy by dissecting the dead body. He introduced the method of sterilizing surgical instruments to prevent sepsis after surgical procedures. The compendium of Shushrita describes hundreds of harps and blunt surgical instruments, and many of them resemble the instruments used by surgeons today. Shushrita is recognized for having developed innovative surgical procedures like reconstruction of nose or rhinoplasty through plastic surgery, use of specific species of ant as dissolvable sutures to close the intestine, surgical removal of cataract, and surgical management of urinary alkali. So we have some medical and surgical implements of 19th century which is originated in India. This is the painting which shows Shushruta's disciples learning surgery by working on vegetables. And here we have this painting by James Wells, commissioned in 1794 by two British surgeons who published along with the first known description of plastic surgery in West. The Indian rhinoplasty technique was rediscovered by Western medicine in 18th century when the East India Company surgeons Thomas Curso and James Findlay witnessed Indian rhinoplasty procedures at British Residency in Pune. The surgeon published photographs of procedures and its nasal reconstruction outcomes in October 1794 issue of Gentleman's Magazine in London. So here an oculist treating a patient with specialized instruments. You can see this picture. Next, medicinal genetics in Ayurveda. The Charaka Samhita, one comes across the earliest reference to the genetic basis of diseases. Charaka points out that the reproductive elements is composed of seeds, which is bija, which are further divided into parts, which is bija bhaga, and subparts bija bhaga vaya. Each part or subparts of seed represents a particular organ of the body and damage the other part of the organ. Inoculations for smallpox. In the 18th century, British officials and travelers observed and documented the practice of inoculation for smallpox, which was in vogue in India centuries before vaccination was discovered by Edward Jenner. In an account written by London's College of Physicians J. Z. Holwell, who studied and himself practiced the Indian method of inoculation, testified to its great effectiveness in preventing the occurrence of smallpox. Microbiology and parasitology. These are references to microbial life in the textbooks of medicine in Charaka Samhita dating back to several centuries before the Common Era. Lower life forms were classified into pathogenic and non-pathogenic. The pathogenic organisms include microbes that cannot be seen with the naked eyes. Technical nomenclature was developed for different types of microbes, and their shapes and sizes have also been described. How those physicians were able to provide such descriptions or even conceive of microbes centuries before microscopes were invented remains a mystery. Communicable diseases and epidemics. Sushruta Samhita describes communicable diseases and explains that disease can be transmitted from one person to another by close contact through air, sharing clothes, sleeping together, and so on. Fumigation is mentioned as a measure to prevent infectious diseases from spreading. Charaka Samhita devotes an entire chapter to epidemiology and prescribes methods to prevent epidemics as well as manage the outbreak of epidemics during the period of King Ashoka. An efficient public healthcare system was established. An evolving pharmacopoeia. The practice of medicine in Ayurveda is based on the principle that there is no substance in the world that does not potentially have medicinal property. The evolution of Ayurvedic pharmacopoeia represent a continuous and unfinished quest for discovering new medicines from natural resources. About 1,500 medicinal plants have been described and formulated into thousands of medicines in the tradition of Ayurveda. Hundreds of animals and animal products have been mentioned in the text. Around the 6th century in the Common Era, the branch of medicine specializing in the use of minerals and metals known as Rashasastra developed and established itself, especially in the north of India. The older tradition of herbal medicines continued to be practiced in India's southern states. In Tamil Nadu, the system of Siddha medicine, traditionally regarded as having been founded by 18 Siddhas or realized beings, but in practice similar to Ayurveda, added to its pharmacopoeia drugs, metallic and mineral components. pluralistic approach to healthcare. Ayurveda nurtured a pluralistic approach to healthcare in India. From ancient times, healthcare in India developed in the two streams of the folk and classical expression. India has a rich tradition of folk medicines, which was organized into paramedical force of health practitioners, bone setters, poison healers, and birth attendants who delivered primary health care for the people. Many of these traditions have survived into modern times. Today, India is perhaps the only country in the world that officially recognizes the pluralistic healthcare system, patronizing medical systems like Ayurveda, Yoga, Neuropathy, Unani, Siddha, and Homeopathy. Cross-cultural interactions. Ayurveda benefited from the cross-cultural interactions and spread out of India into neighboring countries like China, Sri Lanka, Tibet, Thailand, and Indonesia. Buddhism played a major role in the spread of Ayurveda outside India. When Alexander the Great invaded India in 325 BCE, he was so impressed by the snake bite healers and Ayurvedic physicians that he invited them to Greece. There is historical evidence indicating interactions between the physicians of the Greek medicine and Ayurveda. Important textbooks of Ayurveda like Charaka Samhita, Shushrita Samhita, and Ashtanga Hridaya were translated into Tibetan, Persian, and Arabic languages in the Middle Ages. Travelers from China and Middle East narrated in their account the advanced state of medicinal practice in India. The dynamic literary tradition. The history of Ayurveda reveals the evolution of vibrant and dynamic medical tradition with compendia, medical lexicons, pharmacopoeias, handbooks, manuals of treatment, and so on being composed at important chronological and geographical landmarks. For example, in 18th century CE, a treatise devoted exclusively to diagnostic was composed of Madhava known as Madhava Nidana. In the 11th centuries, a new treatise were composed on dietetics. The Vishwanatha Sena called Pathya Vinayskaya. In the 13th century, the Sangadhara Samhita was composed of subjects of pharmacy and pharmaceuticals, providing the first description of physiology of respiration. When the pulse diagnosis was introduced in Ayurveda, independent treatises were composed on the subject. This tradition of constant updating and documenting of medical knowledge continued without a break right to the colonial period. In 19th century, Ayurveda suffered a setback when unfavorable policies and regulations were enforced by the colonial rulers. However, with the publication of main Ayurvedic texts, a revival set in around the turn of 20th century with a few leading Indian scholars coming out in defense of the discipline. Global resurgence of Ayurveda in the post-independence period. Ayurveda resurgence continued, and in recent years it was gaining prominence as the whole system approach to healthcare under the banner of complementary and alternative medicines. Although it is not the West, Ayurveda is taught and practiced in many countries like Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, Austria, Netherlands, and so on. There are many schools of Ayurveda in the United States. Contemporary status of Ayurveda continues to manage a wide range of conditions effectively, like chronic degenerative diseases and lifestyle disorders, and is being sought after by the people around the globe as a whole. In moving towards an integrative approach to healthcare, Ayurveda continues to inspire vision of healing that is holistic, pluralistic, and integrative at the same time through a tradition that has exhibited remarkable continuity, resilience, and adaptiveness to the vicissitudes of time. Thank you.